Now, this particular setup I like to teach people because I would say at this point in my career, this setup has made me more money than any other. Actually, often more than any of the others combined. It's a great fashion and commercial lighting setup, and it's commonly referred to as three-point lighting. So we have three strobes in this case. We have our main light, which I've chosen a beauty dish. And the reason I've chosen the beauty dish is because it has a little bit more contrast, a little bit more shape, really just gives you more control when you're going for that kind of edgy fashion or commercial look. So that's our main light. And then in the rear, we have two rim lights. And so these are just our silver reflectors. Now, you could do this with one silver reflector and use your cinefoil if you don't have a second. You could do bare bulbs and then perhaps use foam core to try to block them off. You can be resourceful. But in this case, what I have is my two silver reflectors. These actually just come with the lights. It's not something I had to purchase additionally. And so what you'll see as a result is the main light carving out the features on the face, and then two rim lights, which helps define her from the background. Now, the reason that this is so popular right now is that the more lights that you add to a scene, it tends to make it look a little bit more polished and refined. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason is this lighting setup is very easy to composite. So if you look at most athletic posters and many, many advertisements, they have this lighting setup because it's easy to stick it in on other backgrounds and kind of put it in Photoshop for a totally different effect in the end. So that's what we have right now. If you want, you can control the light. If you want to make it more dramatic, you can switch to a silver dish and it will make it a lot more contrasty and dramatic. If you want it to be softer, you switch to a softbox. And also, if you want to have a little bit more drama, you can also raise the light up or move it off to the left and right. Again, the more shadow you add, the more dramatic it becomes. So I'm going to shoot a couple frames like this, and then we're going to go for a little bit more drama by adding a grid, and you can actually see the difference that will make. So one of the other tips that I wanted to give you was that you can actually get the hair blowing and out of the face and give you a little bit more movement and drama. One of the ways you can do this is by using a piece of foam core. And so you can just take a plain piece of foam core and actually kind of flap the hair. Obviously, that's the cheapest solution, but it becomes a little bit exhausting. I personally like the effect that it has. But what I usually do is I use a fan that's meant for drying floors, and you can get it at Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, kind of a home improvement store, for about $30 to $50. The one I have here is $40. It has variable power. All I need to do is stick it on the floor, turn up the power, and it lifts the hair off of her shoulders. It captures a little bit more energy to the shot. So that's what we're going to do here. Great. Now, for those of you who are trying it at home, if you check out all of my settings, you can see the camera settings as well as the power of the lights, and you can actually see the angles here. Now, one of the things to be careful of is if your lens can actually see those lights or even the edges of it, you'll start to get lens flare. Right now, I just switched over to a different lens. I switched over to a 50mm, and when I do so, when I'm shooting wider and I have the wider front element, it actually picks up the lens flare from the sides. Now, in fashion photography, I actually do this all the time on purpose. It gives that feel that the person I'm photographing, maybe they're on stage. It gives a little bit more of that ambiance. But a lot of times you don't necessarily want it. So you can do a couple things. You can add a lens hood to your lens, and it'll block off a little bit of that excess light. But the other thing you can do is you can take pieces of foam core or cinefoil or something, and you just block off the light so that it's not hitting the lens of your camera, but it's still hitting the subject. And so it's pretty simple to do. Again, it doesn't need to be an expensive setup, but it's something to watch out for. If you're looking in the back of your camera and you're seeing that problem over and over again, try the cinefoil, try using something to block it off, and then also try modifying the angle of your light. If it's pointed kind of straight back at you and it's hitting her, it doesn't need to be pointed straight back at the camera. You can actually aim it so it's kind of across your set. So really just the edge of the light is catching the side of the model, helping them stand out instead of having it pointing back at camera. So watch out for that. Try to avoid lens flare if it's not used for a creative purpose. Okay, good. When I'm working with this kind of commercial or fashion lighting, sometimes I want to make it a little bit more dramatic, a little bit darker and maybe a little bit more mysterious. So let's say that I'm not trying to composite, and instead what I want to do is maybe this is an image of a singer or an athlete, something like that. And what I really want, or all that I really care about, is that it's dramatic, but it makes their face stand out. And so there's a couple things that you can do so the illumination on the face is brighter than the rest of the body. So the first thing that you can do is you can add a grid. And I frequently describe this as having light in a bucket. So if I have a bucket of water, or light in this case, and I'm throwing that water from further back, I throw it and it will hit the entire subject. It will make, it kind of spreads out and illuminates the entire subject. Okay, so if I take the same bucket of water and I move closer, if I throw the water at her, now it hits a more concentrated area and there's more water there. The same thing with light. So if I'm trying to concentrate the light on her face, what I can do is I can actually move the light in closer. And what that does is it makes it have more drastic light fall off. So it'll be brighter on her head and her torso, and then it quickly falls to shadow. So that's one way that you can make an image more dramatic. I see this a lot in celebrity portraiture. The next way, though, is you can add a grid. And by adding the grid, it's focusing those light beams. So for me, it's like that bucket of water, basically putting a funnel on the end. So if I have that funnel, it forces all the light out in one direction, and that's what a grid does. And grids come in different degrees and different strengths. Right now, I have on a 20-degree grid, and it's going to focus light on her face. So what you'll be able to see is an image just with a beauty dish, then what it looks like once you add a grid, so it really focuses the light, and then I'll actually move the beauty dish in a few steps so you can see that it can make just kind of light on the face and then complete fall off to darkness everywhere else. It can make really dramatic effects. All depends on what you're going for commercial, fashion, or portrait images. Typically I use this for kind of edgy fashion portrait looks.